thank you so much for that beautiful song. Oh, there it goes. And introduction. One of the work that we do in the conference is to inspire churches. And we have tools to do that. And one of the tools that we do every week is a magazine called BC Alive. That is a weekly magazine that publishes stories from all over the conference. Be that an event, be that a missing member, like what you have submitted this week. You have 2 pages of missing members. What that shows to other churches, like this church actively cares for its members because they're looking for them. So that is one of the things that we would like to do, is to inspire churches. And be that a baptism, or be that a wedding, or something. See, I received this call from the conference. They said, "Can you connect me with this church that did this soup kitchen?" That was a small church out in Ashcroft. So that's what it does. You would never know that your little basket that you have for Sabbath school would inspire a church somewhere out in the Yukon that read about it and say to themselves, "Hey, that is an awesome idea. We can do the same thing. Let me see what church did this." And they will connect them with your church, asking for that person, "Can you give us hints of how you did that?" So that's what we try to do at the conference. We do it through a magazine called BC Alive, which is free. You can go to the conference website, bcadventist.ca, and you can put your email there and you can just sign up. We do it through websites and videos and all of this media stuff that we try to do. So anything, you have an event coming up here. That is something that you would like to share. I always tell churches, if you are excited about your church, you can't keep it to yourself, right? You got to share it. I've heard other arguments too, like, "No, we don't want to share it." So that's like boasting. That's like being a show-off. And I would counter and tell them, you know what? If them disciples didn't share their story, do you think we will have a New Testament? See, the greatest story ever told is the gospel story. And I would always say the second greatest story ever told is the gospel experience. And you gotta share your story. Somebody said that if you don't share your story, somebody from the outside will share that story, and guess what? It's usually negative. So share your story. So today I'm gonna be telling a story. And it's a December story. So happy December, everybody. Christmas spirit is high, and you turn on the radios and the Christmas songs are there, and everybody seems to be happy and all of that. But for us Filipinos, we own Christmas, man. You go to the Guinness World Record, the Filipinos, we have the longest Christmas season in the entire universe. Do you know when our Christmas season starts? September. That's right. Do you know when it ends? The 3rd Sunday of January. That's Christmas for us. So today I thought I'd share a Christmas story with you all and go through a bunch of questions before we can appreciate what Christmas means for us. Now, I'm not going to be talking about, elves with green suits and some dude climbing down the chimney, 70-year-old guy. That's pretty freaky stuff. In some parts of the world, if somebody goes to the machine, he's going to get shot. We're not going to be talking about that. I want to ask a simple question today. And the first question is this. What was the world like when Jesus was born? What was the world when Jesus was born? The answer is the world was ruled by the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire ruled everything. How did the Roman Empire come to rule the world? To give you a glimpse, here is a record of the Roman general Germanicus. 15 BC, another general, he quelled revolts in the areas above Rome. This is what was said of him. He slaughtered the population across the Rhine. For 50 miles around, he wasted the country with sword and flame. Neither age nor sex inspired pity. Only the destruction of the race would end war. So as we begin to ask the question, how did the Roman Empire come to rule the world? Does this record give you an insight of what was the world like when Jesus was born? Here's another here. This was from General Titus, conquering of Judea. This is what it's been said. They were accordingly scourged and subjected to torture of every description before being killed, and then crucified opposite to the walls. 500 or sometimes more being captured daily. The soldiers, out of rage and hatred, entertained themselves by nailing their prisoners in different positions or postures, crucifixion. And so great was their number that space could not be found for the crosses or the bodies. It's according to the ancient Jewish historian, Josephus. So let me give you an idea of what these guys were like. They would crucify people just for their entertainment. Now, you think WWE, this wrestling drama, is wicked enough. This is real stuff. Here's what another Greek historian said. Polybius, a Greek historian, recorded this while he was viewing a city that was destroyed by the Roman Empire. And he saw human and animal corpses everywhere. This is what he wrote. It seems to me that they would do this, they the soldiers, would do this for the sake of terror. The Romans invented the crucifixion, by the way, and according to some historians, the soldiers would actually compete who would invent the worst torture ever. And the worst torture in that time was the cross, crucifixion. That's how the Romans were like. So the question is then, who ruled the world when Jesus was born? Romans did. How did the Roman Empire rule the world? Brutal fear. So when we take a look, I think a bird's eye view of the Bible, we will see themes like this, for example. When you read Mark, it's just a bird's eye view, okay? When you read Mark, you would realize that Mark is trying to tell his readers that Jesus is the suffering servant. When you try to read Luke, Luke will try to make his case and say that Jesus is Lord. And when you look at John, John will say that Jesus is the Son of God. And of course, all those Bibles will be books, but just when we end in Revelation, John will say that Jesus is the judge. And when we read Matthew, we begin to ponder, why did Matthew begin with a genealogy? We would notice that. Why? Because Matthew would like to make a case that Jesus is King. That's a bird's eye view of books. So, let's get into this Christmas story. We know that Christmas is more than just exchanging gifts, right? Or Boxing Day, or Jingle Bells, and fa la 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 la, and all that stuff, and vegetarian turkey. Okay, let's go into the story. Caesar Augustus, when he ruled the world by the Roman Empire. Now the question is this: if you are Caesar and you have conquered all of this land, how would you rule if you are in Rome? Okay, Rome and Judea, that's pretty far. So how would you do that? I mean, if you are Caesar, okay, and your world starts from India all the way to England, how would you rule the entire kingdom when it would take you 9 months to just get there? How would you do that? So this was a challenge for Caesar. And the problem with conquering the world one of the historians. He said, old and long-received principle of Roman policy which employs kings among the instruments of servitude. It was a long-standing Roman practice to employ kings in a way to employ puppets. Okay? So Rome would go into an area and they would pick up a puppet king and say, as long as you obey us, as long as you give us money, as long as you give us slaves, you will rule the land on our behalf, and we won't have to kill you. So in the land of Israel, Rome found a young warrior named Herod, who was half Jewish, okay, and half Edomite. And according to historians, he was a Roman sympathizer. The Roman Senate, in fact, declared him the king of the Jews. That's how they did it. Here's how it went down. When the Senate was dissolved, Mark Antony and Caesar went out of the Senate house with Herod between them and with consuls and other magistrates before them in order to offer sacrifices and to lay out their decrees in the capital. Antony also feasted Herod the first day of his reign. And thus did this man receive the kingdom, according to Josephus. So King Herod came to rule the land of Israel as a puppet king for the Romans, for the Caesars. Here's an artist rendering of Herod. Kind of looks like Santa Claus, eh? I wonder. Herod, according to historians, was a fierce warrior. Now I want to take several minutes to show you how this is. You guys ready? We're reading in the slides right here. Okay? Herod conquered Jerusalem in 37 BC. According to some historians, he had with him 3,000 men under his command, and they were enforced by several Roman legions, 6,000 Roman cavalry. Notice what happened. When the troops poured in, a scene of wholesome massacre ensued. And the Jews of Herod's army were determined to leave none of their opponents alive. Masses were butchered in the alleys, crowded together in the houses and flying to the sanctuary. No quarter was given to infancy, to age, or to helpless woman. And Herod claimed that he did this with the will of God. He massacred thousands of Jews so he could make Caesar happy. Herod needs to keep Caesar happy, otherwise he will lose his kingship. Josephus again. In short, one can mention no suitable spot within his realm which he left destitute of some mark of his homage to Caesar, and then let his esteem overflow to the provinces. Herod, the king of the Jews, was so intent on pleasing Caesar that he actually adopted the titles admirer of the Romans and admirer of Caesar. You've got to remember, this guy is half Jewish, right? To make Caesar happy, you know what he did? Herod built statues, altars, and idols of Caesar everywhere he went. Remember Exodus 20, verse 3? What does it say? You shall have no other gods before me. And what is this Jew doing? So there goes the first commandment out the window. How about the second commandment? Was not to make any graven image of anyone or anything, but only worship God. What did King Herod do? He makes worship centers called ecclesia. Does that word sound familiar? Church. Ecclesia of Caesar. He makes centers, worship centers with Caesar in there, with monuments and statues and altars all over the place. Now let me ask you this. Do you think the Jewish people really like Herod? We're just getting warmed up. Here's more. 1 Samuel, verse 24. The Jews had a belief that 1 Samuel chapter 24, that when King David was fleeing from King Saul for his life, David had to hide in a cave on a rock outcropping. Now the Jews believed that this rock outcropping in 1 Samuel 24 was a place called Masada. Anybody here been to Israel yet? Okay, if you have a chance in your entire life, you've got to do this. You've got to go to Israel. It's such an amazing, rich history right there. So Herod was noted by saying, if our greatest King David hid out in a cave on Masada fleeing for his life, I, as a king now, will live in luxury on Masada. So King Herod built a 3-story palace on this mountain in Masada. We were there last February, and I'll show you some pictures. This is the pastors in BC going out in Israel in January, and we were all crammed into this I don't know what it's called, gondola, and it would take you 3 minutes from the bottom of the mountain all the way up to Masada. 3 minutes going up. And again, this is the pastor with our Jewish guide giving us the history of Masada. Man, it is just fabulous. Again, if you have a chance to go to Israel, take it. It's amazing. Probably not now with the conflict that's happening, but after that. This is the Dead Sea, or the Dead Sea from the mountain, Masada. Okay? And this is Masada, Herod's palace. So Herod built a 3-story palace in this mountain. You guys want to see more details on what this palace looked like? Alright, here we go. Herod had Italian columns made of solid marble imported from Rome. He had hot tubs and cold baths installed at the top of Masada. You know how hard it is to get up to the mountain? Much more big marbles up there. Herod, okay, and you will see this there when you get to Masada. Herod had artists come in and paint frescoes on the wall. Herod also put a pool on the roof. Now, why is that important? It is important, it is used because it hasn't rained there in 700 years. So how did he get water up in his palace? Well, what he did, according to some historians, is that Jerusalem is 17 miles away. And down the mountain there are several giant channels. So Herod redirected the valleys and dug giant cisterns out of the rock in the bottom of the valley of Masada. So when it rained in Jerusalem, all the water would drain down into these channels into the desert and collected into the cisterns. And in one rain, according to some historians, it is believed that Herod would capture enough water for 10,000 people in 10 years. Herod basically, he basically rebuilt the wilderness 2,000 years ago. Everywhere King Herod went, he built massive stuff. The bigger, the better, the more beautiful, the better. At one point, Herod wanted to build a palace between Jerusalem and his hometown Edom. And he called this place Herodium. That's a good name for yourself. So if I'm going to make myself, I'm going to make it Charleseum. Right? Herodium. And Herod wanted to build this palace on top of the mountain, just like Masada, right? Well, the only problem was, the spot that he wanted to build his palace, there was not a mountain there. So he had a mountain built. Because, that's what you do. That's what you can. He had a mountain built 2,000 years ago in the middle of wilderness. The Herodium had a pool. The pool was 9 feet deep. And it was so large that there's a gazebo in the middle. And the only way you can get to the gazebo is in the boat. Think about that. Who here has pools in their backyard? This guy has a gazebo in the middle, and the only way you can get to that gazebo is by boat. Oh, everything that Herod did was massive. By the way, Jesus was at a spot in the Mount of Olives where you can see this mountain. On a clear day, you can see this mountain from a distance. And if you look past this mountain, you can actually see the Dead Sea in the background. Remember what Jesus said to a bunch of young people? His disciples? Remember this? If you have faith, you can say to this mountain, be thrown into the sea, and it will happen. It's like Jesus was saying, this stuff that Herod is doing, if you have faith, you can do bigger stuff than what he's doing. If you have faith, you can actually say to Herod's mountain, be gone, and it will be gone. Those are powerful words by Jesus. He had, here's another one. Herod also controlled the religious establishment. At one point, as he was dying, he ordered all of the most influential Jews to the Hippodrome in Jericho. It's a huge gymnasium. And this is what he did. He had this stadium filled with the most influential Jews. Then he had the guards barricade the doors and gates, and he said, when I die, I want you to slaughter everybody in the stadium. So I will be guaranteed that there will be weeping and mourning at my death. Herod was a very evil man. He controlled the religious system. He controlled the government system. He controlled the economic system. If you disagree with Herod, Herod will kill you, just like what happened right here. Another disturbing thing that scholars shared was that Jerusalem was a large city, but it has no farmland. So the question is, where did they get their food? Historians believe that 80 to 90% of the people in Jesus' day were involved in some type of agricultural work. Most of Jesus' parables are parables about, working peasants, right? About farming and all of that. People were involved with olive presses, vineyards, fishing, wheat, barley, pork, 4 kinds of soil, the sheep and the goats. Jesus talks about that. And everyday working people are sharing what they do. 80 to 90% of the people are providing the food, the fish, and the goods to be eaten. And so you have a small minority of rich people living in Jerusalem, and 80% of them from the peasants. Here's another historian. Herod the Great claimed 25 to 33% of the Palestinian grain within his realm, and 50% of the fruit trees, and 50% of the fish. So let's say that you are a fisherman. You spend the whole night fishing in the Galilee or wherever that is. Your nets are full, you haven't slept all night, and you come to the dock, the Sea of Galilee, and waiting on the dock is one of Herod's men, a tax collector. Probably somebody like Matthew. Now you know why Matthew was so much needed. He worked for the Romans, he worked for Herod. Now this tax collector has to take a portion of your fish and give it to Herod because Herod demands it. And if you have a problem with that, tax collectors have bodyguards with them. You either give or you die. Now this tax collector has to take 50% for Herod. And as a tax collector, he has the freedom to also get however he wants. So you fished all night, you are tired, and you come to the dock, and there's this guy with bodyguards who says, 2 for Herod, 1 for me, 1 for you, 10 for Herod, 15 for me, 1 for you. And if you don't do that, there's consequences. Got fed up. Herod gets half. Here's the list of the taxes back then. Roman tribute tax. You have to pay that tax because Caesar, okay, Augustus Caesar is God and he demands it. And then you have the Herod tax. And then you have to pay the transit tax. And then you have to pay the market exchange tax. And then you got to pay the church tax. And like a tithe. And then you still have special offerings. Historians believe that in Jesus' day, you are living under the 80 to 90% taxation. And we complain about our 15% HST. I mean, this guy's got it rough. 80 to 90%. Everyone is in debt. Now, can we relate to this? Who here has no debt? Don't raise your hand. How many of us here have credit cards? What is our credit rating? And guess what? Come Boxing Day, we're going to still use that. In Jesus' time, people were losing family lands because they are in debt. Remember the Lord's Prayer? Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our. That takes a whole different meaning now, knowing that these people are really in debt. The common people, everybody is in debt. A high delegation was sent to Rome requesting a reduction in the tax burden. They complained that Herod reduced the entire country to helpless poverty. The farmers, who made up most of the population, were reduced in bad years to borrowing the food they needed to live. I mean, this is the basic of basic. They just want to survive. They can barely survive. Why? Herod has taxed them and reduced them to poverty so he can do what? So he can do with the people. So what did he do with the people's money? So he can build hot tubs in Masada and build 500,000 seat stadiums. And you as a common person, you are starving. And you see this king of the Jews living in luxury. This is the reign of King Herod. This was the life in the first century. Open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 2. Okay. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. Let's see if we can find a little meaning after reading this text. Now Matthew is telling the Jesus story. Okay, again in Matthew wants to proclaim that Jesus is King. Matthew is telling the Jesus story, the real Christmas story, not some Santa Claus and jingle bells and la 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 la. This is the real thing. In chapter 2 of Matthew specifically wanted to tell the Christmas story. And I would like you to take notice the detail that he includes right in the beginning. My Bible says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod. It's like Matthew wants you to know what the setting was like. Alright? And anybody reading the Matthew story would be like, I know that Herod. He killed my grandma. He killed my grandpa to death for slavery. He taxed my family to death. Now read the next text. Magi, the wise man, from the east, came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born, the King of the Jews?" Now, how do you think Herod would feel being asked a question like this? Remember, the Roman Senate declared Herod the king of the what? Of the Jews. And so these three wise men, because that's what you see in the laws, right? Three wise men. Actually, there's no such thing. We don't know if there's three or more. Some scholars even say that these wise men were astrologers, people who study stars, and they came to bless Jesus. Now, how radical is that? Astrologers blessing Jesus? Wow. Moving on. And we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Now, why is all of Jerusalem disturbed? Who lives in Jerusalem? Exactly. The rich, the elites, Herod's employees live in Jerusalem. And who keeps their lifestyle going? Herods. And their job is to make Herod happy. So Herod was providing them with a certain lifestyle that oppresses the majority of the people and take their money so they can live this kind of lifestyle. And so when this wise man, these outsiders, these astrologers comes into the scene and they say, "Hey, we heard that a true king has been born." Well, what does that mean? Well, if a true king has been born, that means King Herod is going down. And that would mean that the lifestyle of those, the rich, the elites in Jerusalem, will be changed too. The birth of Jesus threatens the whole system. Verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them that exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and as soon as you find him, please report to me, so I may also go and worship him." Yeah, right. Verse 9. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over a place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. Coming into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh and of iPods and iPhones, Blu-ray TVs and flat-screen TVs and Apple computers. Because that's what we do now, right? Verse 12. Having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, well, they were smart people. They were called wise men for some reason. They returned to their country by another route. See, Matthew paints a picture, and he begins with chapter 2, verse 1, and Matthew says there that who is king? Herod is king. And then Matthew continues, and then he says that some wise men from the east come and they show up in the scene, and they say, "Wait a minute, there's a new king in town." Matthew is confronting the readers with this question: who is king. In Matthew, he is asking who is king, Herod or Jesus? If you lived in Bethlehem during that time, do you think Herod was a good king? Or is it time for a change? It's time for a new king. That is what Matthew is saying. It's time for a revolution. It's time for a new kind of king. See, when we think of Christmas, it's not all fa la 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 la. Christmas is about economics. The rich are getting richer. The poor are getting poorer. The oppressed are getting oppressed more and more and more and more. Imagine you're living in some village in Galilee and some of the people around you are in heavy debt. You lost your family land. You can't pay your bills. And Herod had just announced that he's going to up the taxation because he wants to build another hot tub somewhere. And in your village, a bunch of people come and say, "Hey bro, have you heard the good news? Have you heard the news? Alicia, have you heard the news? That a new king has been born?" Do you know what that means? That means Herod is going down. How would you have responded if you heard that good news back in Bethlehem? I would be like, "Whoa! Yeah, baby! Herod's going down! Enough of this tax stuff." When you are excited about something, you cannot help but share it. Now, if you have the gospel and you think you live the gospel, you have to share it. I would not be able to be jumping up and down and screaming out loud. I would probably go and say, "Hey, remember how the Roman Senate declared Herod as king? And it was declared and sent the generals and Sanhedrin and all the religious leaders that Herod was king? Do you know where I got the news from? I got the news from the shepherds, man. And the shepherds were like the stinkiest people around. Here we have the Sanhedrin and the rich people, the Senate, proclaiming Herod as king. And you have the shepherds saying, "Hey, the new king has been born. The angels told us." And so, to the lowest of the lowest of the lowest comes news that a new king is in town. Well, imagine if your family members have been murdered by Herod. What would your reaction be when you hear that good news? Boy, Herod is going down because there's a new king in town. So the Christmas story is about worship. It's about the fact that the Herods of this world all eventually will die and their kingdoms burn out and fade away, and the kingdom of God just keeps going and going and going and going. Amen? Amen. See, the Christmas story isn't about elves, Santa, and bells, and reindeer with red noses. The Christmas story is not about people having more stuff, more lights in our houses, and trees. The Christmas story is about revolution. It's about the poor. It's about justice. It's about hope. It's about the good news. What was Jesus' first message? The Spirit of the Lord is on me because He has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind and to set the oppressed free. This is King Jesus, and this is good news. It is God saying the oppressors don't win. Herod doesn't get the last word. Why? Because a baby has been born today. Can you get an amen? Amen. So this is a story about hope. It is a message about a bunch of shepherds who smell and stink, running around saying, hallelujah, hallelujah, a new king is on the scene and Herod is going down. And this new kingdom is going to go on forever and ever and ever and ever. Not a kingdom built with marbles and hot tubs and stuff. It is a kingdom built with love and generosity and grace. This is the Christmas story. May you, brothers and sisters, when you find yourself wondering, how long will Herod be on the throne? May you be reminded that a baby has been born. May you, brothers and sisters, when you find yourself wondering, if God is so good, why do I have cancer? Why divorce? Why poverty? Why famine? Why unemployment? Why suffering? Why depression? Why this problem with my teenage daughter sleeping with some guy? Why separation? We may be wondering, God, if you're so good, and I've been trying to live the way you want me to live, why is this happening to me? And how long is this going to last? Why would you allow stuff like this, God? Where are you? When are you going to show up? How long are you going to let Caesar mock you? How long is Herod going to be king and oppress us? God, where are you? Maybe you're questioning. Maybe that is your question this morning. God, where are you? It was the question of a whole nation of people in the first century. Why is life so unfair? If God is so good, why would God allow me more than 1,000 of my people back in the Philippines suffering, dying in a flash flood, people in Israel and the Gaza Strip killing each other? Where are you? Why death? It may seem that death is the last word. It may seem that suffering is the last word. It may seem that sin has the last word. It may seem that the devil has the last word. It may seem that Caesar has the last word, but Herod doesn't get the last word. Caesar doesn't get the last word. Cancer doesn't get the last word. Addictions doesn't have the last word. Divorce doesn't have the last word. Unemployment doesn't have the last word. Depression doesn't have the last word. Suffering doesn't have the last word. God has the last word. The thief, Caesar, Herod, the devil, does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. God has the last word. And may you, my brothers and sisters, when you find yourself wondering, if God is so good, why is there suffering, death, and pain? May you be reminded that a baby has been born. Jesus